Well, hello. I mentioned in my last video I was going to test and install the Aeroflow AeroWings. These are two clear poly panels that attach to the upper fairing and serve to reduce wind and turbulence in the cockpit area of the bike. I did install them and I tested them. I've had, if you watched other videos, these wings installed on my previous bike, and they work great if you are somebody who tends to ride in all weather, hot and cold, more so cold, and also in wet or snowy weather. In fact, in this clip here, if you look closely, you can see it actually started snowing. So these are a great addition for this time of year, and they are removable in really hot weather when you prefer a little more wind on your body. But in my case, since I'm basically a 12-month-a-year rider in Canada, I really like the optional protection that these offer. Now, these AeroWings came in the box with windshield because they came in the same package. They are very well packaged. They come with a mounting template, which I'm going to show you how to use. And they also come with all the instructions and mounting attachments that you're going to need for the install. The only thing you really need is a set of scissors, some screwdrivers, and maybe a hobby knife to help peel some of these things off. But other than that, everything is in the package, and the instructions are exhaustively comprehensive. Even though the install is very straightforward, but he really made these idiot-proof. So for my install, I started by cutting out the templates offered. It's a heavier grade paper, almost cardboard, and it's clearly marked where you have to cut, so it's pretty hard to screw up this step. Now, because my garage is not heated and it's really cold out now, I'm going to have to remove the two upper fairing panels in order to mount these, which I'll explain later on. To begin, the fairing is held on up front with two screws, and they're underneath forward. You can see the fork leg in this shot. You remove these two screws, and then the rest of the fairing is held on with tabs and bump stops. So by just very gently pulling out the bottom, not very far, maybe a centimeter or so, lift up on the rear end to release the fairing, and you can see there's two tabs that are held on here. These are really easy to break off, so you got to be careful to lift backwards as you do this. Once I have the fairing inside my home where it's nice and warm, I test fit the template onto the fairing and wipe down the area with rubbing alcohol. Now, the kit comes with two alcohol pads, but I, just for simplicity, because I had these at hand, I'm just going to rub down the whole area and get it all covered off. And this removes wax, fingerprint, dirt, you name it. Now next, I tape on the template, and it's simply used to locate the mounting tabs. And the mounting tabs made by 3M have to be kept in a 20 degrees Celsius or higher room or area for 72 hours. So I'm keeping them inside my home. I mount on the receiving part for the AeroWings. There are 3 square panels for the actual mount, and then there's a bump stop over the top of the center, so that when you remove the panel by snapping it, and I'll show you that later on, you don't scratch the fairing. Now, I like to use a little bit of silicone plumber's lube for the rubber grommets. It allows the panel to click on there a little easier. And the install is reverse of the removal. These two hooks at the back top of the panel, be very gentle with them because they're plastic. They slide clearly into 2 slots on the receiver on the bike. Once those are in, you just gently push in the bottom grommets and they snap in and you're good to go. Now, when mounting the actual AeroWings, it's important that as you snap them into place and lining the three tabs, that all you need to do is make sure that the fingers of each of the faces of the 3M, it's almost like solid Velcro, are fully engaged like interlocking fingers.
So for testing this, what I did was I ran up the highway, my usual circuit. I did two actual runs. So I did 10 or 12 kilometers in both directions without the AeroWings on. And I kept them in the trunk. As soon as I stopped, I didn't even pull off the highway. I pulled off to one side and immediately popped them on and then got going again. And my observations were as follows. From the chest up, it does make a huge difference. So about from, about just below my shoulder height and up, it did make a huge difference. It really quieted down the wind in the cockpit area. So I can really hear the engine of the bike, whereas I couldn't so much before. I mean, you can make it out behind the wind noise, but it generally was background sound, actually. With these on, the engine noise is actually quite pronounced. There is a general hissing or white noise, and I'm not sure if it comes from these or if they've taken so much noise swinging around the fairing that I'm actually hearing it come up through the fork portal. I'm not sure, but either way, they really quiet down the noise and the wind from about my knees up to the middle of my chest. More importantly, though, today, for example, when I did the runs, the temperature was about 3 or 4 degrees below freezing, so it was cold. And although I have really good warm winter gloves that I wear, they completely took the air off my hands, or the winds off my hands. So for the first time ever that I've ridden in December and January, where normally my hands, they're not painfully cold, but when you take your gloves off, almost like a day of skiing, your hands are cold. If you put them on somebody's back, it would make them jump. Today, after doing a few runs with these AeroWings on, my hands were actually toasty warm, which was strange, even with really good winter gloves. I do not have heated gloves. These are just insulated Gore-Tex gloves by BMW. And they're really good gloves to begin with. But these really reduce the load on my heated grips. I actually had my heated grips on and they became too warm. And I actually had to turn down the grips. And this is below freezing, I'll remind you. One important note to mention here is that the AeroWings, I tried the stock windshield and I tried an aftermarket windshield, and in both cases the effect was almost identical. Didn't have a whole lot of play up top here above my shoulders, from my shoulders on up. That was more the windshield, but it had a great play within the cockpit area. Really reduced turbulence. So very pleased. I'm keeping them on. I'm wondering how hot they'll be in the summertime, but the beauty about these things are you can pop them off if it gets hot, right? So anyway, they're well worth the money, and they're incredibly popular on, for example, other K-bikes or other BMWs like the K-bikes. But now that they have them for these bikes, I'm quite pleased. Now, one important footnote to this video is the way these AeroWings attach. Now, when you buy them, as you've seen in the video, they're fairly easy to mount. The 3 tabs here are easy to mount, but they have to be kept, as I mentioned earlier, in an environment in excess of 70 degrees for a period of 72 hours for the adhesive to stick on these. That's part one. Part two is taking these off and on. To take these off, it's a simple hit like that, okay? And they pop right off. If you hit down, you will break those tabs that I referred to earlier in the video, okay? With these off, when you put it back on, you have to make sure each one of these panels engages fully, because if they don't, what happens is you could be driving down the street and this could fly off, okay? And take it from me, it's actually happened to me on my K1600. I had taken these off to show somebody at a bike rally, and when I put them back on, I failed to engage these tabs fully. And I wasn't 5 minutes up the road and they blew off, and I didn't realize it had blown off for a few kilometers, and I noticed the bike was windier than normal. And sure enough, these had blown, one of the side had blown off, and I had to replace it. So what the owner of Aeroflow had mentioned to me on the phone one day after that happened was he recommends a keeper string or keeper wire for these AeroWings, so that if they happen to be disengaged or not engaged properly on these three tabs, if it blows off, you won't lose it on the side of the road. So what he recommends is drilling a small hole through the top here and attaching it with fishing line or wire up to the bike on a bolt, and that's an option. So I'm probably going to do that come the spring. I'm pretty much done riding done riding, I guess, for the most part this season, but when I get the bike out in the spring, that's one of the projects I'll do. Anyway, these are a great addition if you are considering, or if you want to try reducing the turbulence in the cockpit area. It's a great option. Anyway, until next time.